Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live Q&A. My name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. You're on my channel, The Steady Coach. And today we're going to be focusing in on a very specific topic for this Q&A. We're going to be answering lots of questions related to how to get help when you have chronic dizziness symptoms. So I'm seeing some questions already popping up in the chat. I know some of you are here with me live, so please say hello. I'm going to again be focusing on answering questions related to the main topic, and time permitting, I'll try to answer some of the others today as well. But again, trying to focus today on this topic because I would say it's probably the one I get asked about the most. So maybe on the ranking, maybe number 2 or number 1, followed by questions about specific symptoms. So again, the purpose of today's Q&A is to help guide you if you have learned a lot about dizziness from my channel, or if you're new to my channel, you're suffering from chronic dizziness symptoms and you don't know what to do next. So we're going to be trying to hone in on a plan for all of you, no matter where you are in that process. So hello, Cynthia. Good morning. I'll be answering your question today. And Maya, hello. Natalie, hi. Good to see you guys. All right. So good to see some people live here. And again, of course, this Q&A will be available to watch anytime. So again, we're going to be covering a ton of material today. So if your head's I was about to say if your head's spinning, it may already be spinning, but if your head's spinning afterwards, you can always come back and watch the Q&A on my YouTube channel. Hello, Isa. Hello, Sherry. Oh my gosh, you're up a little early, aren't you? Brenda, good morning. All right. All right. So we're going to get started. I just want to define something because I don't feel like I've ever explicitly said this on my channel. But when is dizziness chronic? So again, if you found my channel, chances are you're having chronic symptoms, but dizziness is technically not considered chronic until you've had it for at least 3 months. Now, don't freak out if you're still having symptoms after neuritis or some other unknown cause and you're only 8 weeks in and you're like, oh gosh, her techniques don't apply to me. Now what do I do? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that by the technical definition, that's around the time when we start to think of things as chronic. That said, as you guys know, I talk a lot about on my channel the biopsychosocial model of disease. So, no matter what the original cause of your dizziness, no matter whether it just came on out of the blue, or you got off a cruise ship and it happened, or you actually had some kind of vestibular injury, so injury to your ear or another sensory system, because that can happen too, your recovery and your symptoms are always going to be influenced by the psychosocial components that I talk about on my channel. And I usually just kind of encompass all of that into the word stress. But when I say psychosocial, I mean stress, I mean emotions, I mean your reactions, I mean people around you, I mean support, I mean whether you also have a safe home to live in, your past childhood experiences, all that stuff. And I know that might seem crazy if this is your first time dealing with a condition that's been very distressing or has lasted a long time. But regardless of how long you've had your chronic dizziness symptoms, whether that's 1 week or more than 3 months or much, 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 much longer than that, you are going to find something of benefit on my channel. That said, in this Q&A, when I'm talking about how to get help for chronic symptoms, I'm honing in on that group of people who still have symptoms past the expected healing time. In other words, they had symptoms come on and they've just kind of lasted, and your GP or family doctor is kind of like, I don't know what this is. I've got to send you on. So those are the folks that I'm speaking to today. So that's what I'm going to focus on in this Q&A. All right, just taking out our comments. Benjamin, lovely to see you. Hi, Caroline. Hello. And I don't know your name, Jumper. I assume that's a screen name. I don't know, but hello from Finland. I absolutely, that's why I didn't say good morning when I got on. It's good morning over here, but I have viewers from literally everywhere around the world. So I'm not assuming it's morning for you here. Okay. So again, I'm going to start with some basic questions. I promise I'll get into the meatier ones because I know you guys are dying to know things like, what should I do to treat my symptoms? Okay. So we'll get there, I promise. But I want to start with the diagnostic testing because for those of you who are new to my channel, you're going to need to know this information. So this is, again, kind of an amalgamation of many different questions I've been asked on my channel. So I didn't put a name here, but I get asked this question frequently. So I've had dizziness symptoms for a while, and my GP, my family doctor, did not find anything wrong. What now? Okay. So as you guys know, my training is in audiology, and audiologists typically do lots and lots of diagnostic testing. That's really the biggest part of most audiologists' job is diagnostic testing. So I want you to take what I say with a grain of salt because my background is specifically in diagnostic testing. But my opinion is that it's very important at this point to have further testing done and to have the correct referrals and testing done. So I would love to see you referred to an ear, nose, and throat specialist at the minimum, or preferably a neuro-otologist. So that's a doctor who is training in both neurology and ears. Okay, so you really want to go to a specialist who has some training specifically in dizziness. And from there, again, the doctor's job is to rule out tissue damage. So I want you to go into this appointment when you've been referred, when you've asked your GP or your family physician or healthcare professional for a referral. If you have chronic symptoms, your job with this doctor is not necessarily to get an answer or the answer. And I think this is an area where a lot of people start to go wrong because they feel so miserable. They just want the doctor to give them an answer. And these physicians are trained in a very specific way. So I've already I can't believe in the first 2 minutes of this Q&A, I already talked about the biopsychosocial model of disease. Physicians are trained very, very, very intensively in the biological components of disease. So your objective going to one of these physicians is to rule out all the big, bad things. You're ruling out tumors, you're ruling out major systemic diseases, you're ruling out growths, you're ruling out degenerative disorders like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, things like that. Okay. So those are the big bad things we want those physicians to rule out because all of those things can cause dizziness. Now, if you're freaking out right now because you have health anxiety, you are in great company. So forget everything I just said. For most of you, the vast, vast, vast majority of you, you do not have a physical problem. We just want to make sure that it's not there and that you're in the all clear. Okay. So these physicians are going to want to do some kind of laboratory testing and some kind of imaging testing just to make sure there's nothing in there that looks big, bad, and is causing tissue damage. Okay. At this point, if you are in a country or in a location where audiological vestibular testing is available, so these are tests that are designed specifically to check the function of your ears and your vestibular system as a whole. This is a great time to do that as well. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I want you to know that component is not always as essential as people think it is. And again, this deeply pains me as an audiologist who spent a bazillion years learning how to do this and how important it is. And it is important to get the testing done, but I know many of you live in places where you cannot get that kind of testing done. So as you've probably seen from other videos on my channel, tissue damage that relates to your inner ear. So in other words, something like neuritis, which is of an inflammation or virus that attacks the inner ear and causes problems, or even issues that are more severe. I actually have a friend who had to have surgery that cut her vestibular nerve. Okay. So there can be major tissue damage related to the inner ear, and your brain figures it out and adapts. So it's not necessarily the cause of dizziness. But at this point in the game, especially if it's early on, it might really be worth knowing if there's something there, because if it's chronic symptoms that are being caused by some kind of straightforward vestibular issue, then vestibular rehabilitation therapy is is going to work great for you. And you're just going to go through 8 weeks of that and you're going to feel better and you're going to move on with your life. So it's worth having the testing done if it's available. But again, I know many of you don't have that option. So the most important things that we're looking for with this referral to your physician is to rule out big bad things that are causing major tissue damage. And again, these are much, much, much rarer. The vast majority of you do not have those problems. We just need to rule them out first. All right, I'm just going to pop over the comments, make sure people don't have any questions about this. All right, great. Hello, Kamana. I see some more questions popping up in here. And yeah, so I'm going to just pull this one up because this is so related. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure what your name is. So I'm just going to say this person who's here on the screen, and you can tell me your name if you'd like or not. You can stay anonymous. My GP is brushing me off. Yeah, I see that a lot. So medical gaslighting is really an issue with dizziness. Again, I would very, very strongly insist on some kind of referral because in the rare case that this is something related to tissue damage, it's not something that you want to miss. That said, some people with dizziness symptoms have some like very vague symptoms that don't seem to like that a regular GP or family doctor is going to look at and be like, yeah, that just sounds like you're just stressed out or what have you. And I totally, again, I understand that a physician, especially when you're really anxious, does not want to be an alarmist. So I really appreciate physicians who are like that too and are not doing all the over testing. But at the same time, we do need to just make sure, I think, for your peace of mind. And also, again, because there are some situations where tissue damage may be an issue, you want to get those things ruled out. Yeah. Yeah. So, and Paula's chiming in here. Hello, Paula. You're here live. Paula's been on my channel for a while. She was one of my first followers, I think. So it's really cool to have you here live. And she says, my ENT had me do a hearing test, but didn't steer me towards vestibular testing. And I did ultimately see a neurologist and MRIs. Exactly. Exactly. And again, vestibular testing it's not always accessible. Even here in the US, it's really hard to come by. There just aren't enough testing centers. However, I do have great news that you can look on dizzy.com. So this is the American Institute of Balance. Here, I'll put this up on the screen. I put it in the chat. Dizzy.com. Oops. Oh, wow. I should probably be able to spell dizzy, shouldn't I? All right. So dizzy.com. All right. So dizzy.com is the American Institute of Balance website. I'm sorry if you're out of the US, and I know a lot of you are, so please forgive me, although there are some resources there for people outside the country. There's a directory of practitioners, people who are part of a center of excellence or a specialty care clinic, or vestibular rehabilitation providers that are familiar with dizziness will know where to send you to get testing done. So if, again, regardless of where you are, if you are in the US, dizzy.com. In Europe, there are some dizzy.com providers. If not, find a vestibular therapist in your area and ask that person, where's my best bet to go to for testing to make sure that this isn't from a medical cause. All right, cool. Yeah, so this is really good. So good question here. Is there a way to tell if you have tissue damage physically, like ear pressure or something? Unfortunately not. Again, what I can tell you is that there are usually very specific clinical signs that a neurologist is going to spot like that if you actually have physical tissue damage or disease that's causing the symptoms. But there's no way for you to tell unless you are seen. And again, it really pains me to say this because as you guys know on my channel, I really don't go into this very much. By the time people get to me, they've usually been poked and prodded in every possible way. But again, it is important just to make sure that there isn't something wrong in the initial part of your journey. Okay. And MRIs, yes, our MRIs can show tissue damage, Isa. So again, one of the big issues that people are looking for, plus, again, a clinical exam from a physician, I would rest assured, having had that done, if vestibular testing isn't available or you can't access it, then I would feel pretty safe that it's not a tissue damage situation. Okay. Yeah. So, and Kamana is saying, my ENT is saying I need to go for VNG test, but she strongly believes it's MdDS. And you got some crazy symptoms and SSRI, go through some VBRT. So yeah, so Kamana, I think your ENT is doing the correct thing. It's good to just, again, maybe have the testing done, but it, for the most part, the vast majority of you, your doctors are going to be in awe of how normal your tests are, or you're going to have like weird little abnormalities that don't mean anything, that are not clinically significant. And that's the last thing I'm going to say about this topic. That when you are going through these tests, even when you're going through specialty vestibular testing, the issue is that I hate to, and again, it pains me to say this, it doesn't really always give you valuable information, because unless it's showing something that can be surgically fixed, which is very, 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 very rare. If you have a weakness on one side or positional dizziness that's not otherwise explained, it doesn't really tell them what to do with you beyond, okay, that's what may have initially set off your symptoms. But I know for some of you, that's a really important question to have answered. All right. Okay. So again, guys, I know I see a lot of questions here in the chat. I'm focusing very specifically on this topic today of how to get help when you have chronic dizziness symptoms. So I'm not going to be able to get to all the other questions you're asking here, but I will do my best. If we've got time, I will definitely get to as many as I can. All right. So moving on. Okay, so Corazon asked this question. So she asked this on my post that I made before the live Q&A. So she asked, what should I ask at my ENT appointment? And again, it's really a little bit less about what you ask as it is about understanding what question the doctor's trying to answer, and that is the biological question only. And again, it's not that physicians aren't aware of the biopsychosocial components of disease. It's that they're trained in the biological components. So your ENT is looking for tissue damage, and you should expect your ENT to answer the question of whether you have tissue damage or disease or not. And at that point, if you do not have tissue damage or disease, your ENT is not usually going to be able to give you good information and answers. And I'm generalizing here. There are ENTs who specialize in treating triple PD or chronic dizziness. They are very rare. Most ENTs see this stuff and they think, oh, it's something that has to do with anxiety. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with this person. And I'll tell you, I say this, they're not trying to be dismissive. They're well-meaning. They aren't trained in that stuff. They're not trained in how the nervous system can become sensitized by our emotions or our experience, their stress. That's just not their area. So again, your objective there is, and the question you should be asking your ENT is there physical tissue damage or disease that's causing this condition? And if not, fantastic. You check that off your list, and then you take my course, because that's most likely where you're at if you don't have any signs of physical tissue damage or disease. All right, cool. So, and Corazon's asking if her audiogram and tympanogram are normal. Does this mean VRT won't help me? No relationship at all, Corazon. Those are just hearing tests. So that doesn't mean anything about what VRT is going to be able to do for you. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Again, I know we spent a little time on diagnostics here, and that was important to me. But now you guys are all here to learn more about how to get yourselves help with chronic dizziness. So we're going to move on to that topic. And again, I'll try to take questions from the chat when they're on this topic, and we'll get to any of the others that I can at the end. Okay, so one big question is, what is the standard treatment for chronic dizziness and how effective is it? So again, this is something I get asked about on my channel a lot, because many of you go through the diagnostic testing, nothing's wrong or nothing explains what you're going through. Some of you were diagnosed with a unilateral vestibular weakness or vestibular migraine or some of these other symptom-based diagnoses, but then your doctor starts throwing out words like SSRI and CBT and VRT. Like, what do these things mean and how do they help chronic dizziness? So the literature, so the scientific research on this is a bit sparse. It's exploding right now because, as you guys have probably seen, triple PD is unfortunately accelerating quite a bit right now. So it's expanding, but as of right now, we don't have a huge range of scientific research articles to choose from. That said, almost all of them have focused on treatment with vestibular rehabilitation therapy, which we will talk about, cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, and or SSRIs and SNRIs and other serotonin related psychiatric medications. Okay. And then some of you may have also been given benzodiazepines and other medications for anxiety. I'm not including those because those are not considered to be a treatment rather than they are helpful for managing symptoms. So here's the thing. VRT, which is something I talk about on my channel a lot, is basically it's a way of organizing exposure work for you guys. So again, I'm speaking if you're just joining the Q&A, I said this toward the beginning. In this Q&A, I'm really speaking to my folks who've already had tissue damage ruled out or whose physicians suspect this is triple PD or who've had really chronic symptoms that have been medically unexplained, okay? So for you guys, what's happening is your brain has not adapted to whatever change originally happened. For whatever reason, your vestibular system stopped coordinating your senses correctly and your brain did not adapt. It did not reorganize your vestibular and sensory systems. So, in other words, as we've talked about in many of my videos, your brain is not coordinating your eyes, ears, and sense of touch. So, VRT is a type of therapy. It's a physical therapy that is basically designed to help your eyes, ears, and sense of touch start to work together again. Okay. So, in theory, this is kind of the gold standard treatment, right? If your eyes, ears, and sense of touch aren't working together properly, then you go do physical therapy to help integrate your eyes, ears, and sense of touch. The thing is, there are some limitations to VRT. VRT is it's a oh gosh, I'm going to use the word fake. I don't mean it's fake. It's amazing. I'm trained in VRT. But it makes up fake conditions. So you're in an office or in your home, you're looking at a card, you're moving your finger around, you're doing all sorts of cool stuff to simulate real life, but nothing is actually quite like real life. And for many of you who have chronic conditions, your problems are strangely inconsistent and tend to happen in environments that you can't really simulate using VRT. I know some of you have had very expensive VRT using virtual reality, and that's really cool. And again, if that's worked for you, fantastic. Again, it makes sense that something like that might work. But again, for most of us, that's not accessible. And again, from my perspective, as someone who works with chronic dizziness through a psychosocial lens, I feel like just trying to force your brain to coordinate your eyes, ears, and sense of touch without addressing the factors that are causing your brain to not adapt in the first place, that's not the most direct approach to healing, in my opinion. Again, I'm not saying VRT shouldn't be a component of your treatment. It absolutely can be. That's why I have a completely free VRT program in my free course. And as you guys know, as I said previously in this Q&A, many of the people on my channel do not have access to providers who can do this for them or don't have the funds to go through vestibular rehab therapy. So the program is literally free. It's a PDF. You can sign up. I'll put the link in the video description after the Q&A, but it's at members.thesteadycoach.com. You can sign up for the course and download the VRT program. It can be really helpful. And if you've heard from Megan, if you've seen Megan's success story on my channel, she talks about the role that VRT played in her life. But again, from my perspective, for people with chronic dizziness, it's more of a way of exposing your brain to the things that bother you than it is a magic pill that's going to suddenly recoordinate all of your senses. Because the problem, in my opinion, with chronic dizziness, it's not that your brain is broken and that it doesn't know how to coordinate the senses. It's that something is interfering with your brain's adaptation. So Neuroplasticity is something your brain is doing day in, day out, every day of your life, even right now. So, what is keeping your brain from rewiring the sensory systems or the sensory processing? What's keeping it from doing that? So, VRT doesn't necessarily address that component of things, which is where in the treatment protocols that are now accepted, CBT and SSRIs come in. And you have definitely, if you've watched videos on my channel, you have certainly heard me use a lot of principles from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is basically it bases it bases treatment on the assumption that by challenging and changing the way that you think and behave, you can dramatically improve your functioning. Okay? So there's a lot about reframing, and there's a lot of exposure work and proving to yourself that you can do it, and that's great stuff. It's really valuable stuff, and I'm not at all anti CBT, okay? But I'm saying that out loud because before I came on to give this Q&A, I'm like, oh my gosh, I really hope I don't make any psychologists mad with what I'm about to say. But because in my opinion, CBT is inadequate for the treatment of triple PD. And you don't need to look further than the literature to see this. So again, our literature is not so dense. We don't have a ton, but even with cognitive behavioral therapy, even with VRT, even with the addition of medications, we're still looking at like 50, 60% success rates. And when I read that in an article, I'm like, what in the world happens to the other 40 or 50%? And if you're on my channel, you may be in that other very, very, very large percent of people who don't get better with these treatment methods. But again, CBT is amazing. The components that I feel that it's missing is that it's addressing the thoughts, but it's not necessarily addressing the emotional processes that lead to the thoughts. So I'm going to give a couple examples from my clients because I think this will illustrate it. Because I didn't just come to this because I'm a weird rebel, although I guess that's part of it too, but it came from experience working with clients and from research on chronic pain. So I'll get to both of those. But with my experience with clients, what I would see was that I would use cognitive behavioral therapy informed vestibular rehab with people. And we would talk about, but you can see that that's not true. And when you have these thoughts, you've got to challenge them and blah, 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 blah. Again, I'm not doing CBT much justice here. And again, I'm not a psychotherapist. So I'm sure a skilled psychotherapist would be way more effective than I was. But I found people couldn't do it. They'd say, Yonit, I know it's illogical. I know that I can go outside. I know I can. I know I can go to the grocery store and that it's not going to hurt me. I know all this, but I go into a panic and my body, it's like my body is rebelling and I get all these physical symptoms and I just can't push through. It just doesn't feel right to me. And it was interesting to me because I felt like, gosh, am I doing a good job when I'm trying to push people to do stuff that doesn't feel right to them? And I know, again, there's always some component, and when you're dealing with stuff like this, or really any disease, there's going to be some discomfort in one way or the other. So I'm not saying I was uncomfortable making people uncomfortable. In fact, I always told people if you're in for a VRT session and I don't make you dizzy a whole bunch, then I'm not doing my job, right? If we want the brain to adapt, then we've got to challenge the brain. But it seems like what I was inadvertently doing was villainizing those parts of my patients that were having trouble, that were agoraphobic, or that were afraid of going to the mall, or that were afraid of going to the grocery store, or were afraid of bending over. It was a pathologizing approach that didn't resonate with me, and it wasn't helping me help my clients best. So as I was learning and learning and learning and working with clients, I started learning about the research that's been going on chronic pain. And it was just like all the light bulbs went off because I realized that when I say chronic pain, I don't just mean, oh, like my back hurts. I mean like severe chronic pain stuff and severe long-term chronic conditions that are medically unexplained, like fibromyalgia, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, um, did I say, I said chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic migraines, like very, very severe chronic migraines. These conditions are incredibly debilitating. And there's a whole bunch of research now showing that CBT is effective, it helps, but it's less effective perhaps than emotionally focused therapies. So a a an effective treatment in my opinion should have some components of cognitive behavioral stuff like reframing and realizing that you're not in danger and all that stuff, like the thinking that you do when when you watch my videos and you feel better. A lot of that is you're rethinking how you think about your symptoms. But I feel that again, based on my experience with patients, but also based on the literature on similar chronic medically unexplained conditions, we really should be thinking about as a field addressing these emotional components, stress, trauma, emotions, and conflict, to sum it up, in the therapy that we give people for triple PD. And you've probably seen some of that on my channel. You've probably seen that in the comments. People have commented about this who've said, "Yep, I went through VRT and CBT and took SSRIs, and it wasn't until I fill in the blank with a therapist that I really started to get better." Again, your mileage may vary. Some people VRT plus CBT is gonna take care of it, but to me, it seems like it's just not the most optimal approach. So I'm gonna pause here and just take a look at the comments, and I'll come back to my lecture in a second here. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm getting the sweetest. Okay, I'm just gonna pull this up on the screen because Emily said something so sweet. So she says, "You're the best present to me. You created the channel literally on my birthday. I feel like you are sent to me and you make me feel it's okay not to be okay at times, which is the first step." Emily, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. That's so sweet of you. Thank you. That made my day. All right. And like I said, I know that a lot of you guys are asking other questions, and a I'm trying to focus today on how to get help for chronic dizziness symptoms, so I'm not going to be able to answer a lot of these other questions about specific symptoms, but I promise, if you post them on my channel, I answer all the comments. All the comments get replies. So if you find a video related to the topic on my channel and post it there, I will try to answer your question there. Okay. Hello, Alma. I see you there. Okay. So moving on. So I just basically told you the standard treatment for chronic dizziness is to give you SSRIs or SNRIs, to give you CBT and VRT. And in my opinion, and the opinion of the people who do the research, it's not effective for a lot of people. And so if you found your way to my channel and you haven't had those treatments, it's reasonable to consider the things that I talk about on my channel as well. And for those of you who've had those treatments, do not feel like there's something wrong with you. I think that those treatments are inadequate. The problem is there's no standard person with chronic dizziness. And again, when I talk on my channel about chronic stress, again, I use the word stress to encompass a whole lot of things, but from the literature on these other chronic conditions, we know that trauma, especially childhood adverse experiences, but also other experiences that are maybe not like trauma, like the most traumatic thing, but just particularly stressful life experiences and certain personality traits that increase the level of stress inside us. Those have huge repercussions for how people do with these kinds of symptoms. So I as far as I'm concerned, it's exactly the same for triple PD. We have to address those things for people to see optimal results. And I've seen some questions on the chat that again I'm not going to be able to answer all of them, but I've seen some questions about remission. First of all, I want to say something about the word. I don't like the word. I don't like the word remission because remission already implies that you're going to get it again, that you have a lifelong chronic condition and you're stuck. I do not believe that triple PD is a lifelong chronic condition. I do not believe it is. I believe that your nervous system is over adapted based on your previous experiences and that you can over adapt it, that can be reversed. And I think that can be reversed permanently. So again, I don't like the word remission at all. But in my that's another reason why I started thinking about this CBT, VRT, SSRI combo that people are getting. I don't think we're really getting to the root of the issue. For some of you, you are. I kind of view people as falling into two groups with triple PD. There's the group that it's just the fear of the symptoms themselves with a couple maybe neurotic personality traits that just leads to this fear cycle, and you're just scared, and you're just scared of the symptoms, and the symptoms come and you're scared of the symptoms. And when we stop that cycle with CBT, with VRT, maybe an SSRI, we're better. Okay. But there's a big, big, big second group of you. That's not the problem. That might be part of the problem. The fear cycle might be part of the problem. But what's really driving this is a nervous system over adaptation because of other stuff in your life, either right now or that's happened to you previously and is being triggered by now. So I feel like for the second group of you, we really need to address those things to make sure you don't have this happen again. And pain is part of life. Suffering is part of life, and dizziness is part of life too. I'm never going to tell anyone you're never going to have any dizziness again, because everyone has dizziness. Everyone. So symptom free is a funny statement too, because I'm not symptom free and I don't have triple PD. I get dizziness sometimes. Sometimes I'll be sitting and I'll just go, ooh, like I'm starting to get a little bit of vertigo for no reason. But my nervous system doesn't care. It's like, well, that's weird. I guess we'll kind of turn the volume level down on that. Or some days I'll wake up and I'll feel really lightheaded. Again, I'm not at all comparing myself to the situation that you guys find yourselves in, but symptom free isn't the objective we're getting to today. It's because again, what do you even call a symptom? Dizziness free isn't where we're getting to. It's, are you going to live a normal life? Are you going to live a normal, fulfilling life and have relatively normal sensations in your body that don't freak you out? Right. So again, I'm not saying we can't stop your symptoms at the level they're at right now and bring them down so that you don't feel them anymore. You can, but you are still going to feel your body sometimes. And sometimes it's still going to be painful or dizzy or unpleasant, because that's how our bodies work. They're not computers. They're not perfect machines. So you're going to feel sensations at some point. However, when people say that they are in remission and then it came back, it means to me that the underlying emotional situation that led to the problem has not been addressed yet. And that's, again, based on my experience and then also the research that has been done on chronic pain. Yeah. So, okay. I'm going to just pop into this question because this is such a good question, Thomas. So, can you relate post-traumatic stress to triple PD? Thomas, absolutely. There's a very strong correlation here. When something traumatic happens to you, your nervous system learns that the world is dangerous, completely understandably, and it becomes more sensitive to danger. So when it perceives danger, like you get a weird dizziness symptom, your brain is turning the volume dial up on everything that it thinks is threatening. So part of the process of managing PPPD related to post-traumatic stress is calming that fear cycle, recognizing it's happening. My brain is just turning up the volume dial because it thinks this is dangerous. Let's cancel that. I'm not actually in danger right now. Okay. And we can do that with our thoughts or with our bodies, using breathing, using other types of relaxation techniques, like letting the tension just go out of our bodies. The second component, if it is a trauma that needs to be worked through, is to work with a mental health counselor or other professional to, I hate using the words process or deal with, but to feel through the trauma and rewire your brain's response to that memory. So your brain is constantly reconsolidating memories. Your brain is constantly taking old memories and working them and storing them a little bit differently. So this isn't actually a novel idea at all, this neuroplasticity surrounding traumatic memories or any memories at all. The idea here is, the way I explain this to clients is, It's like when you see a really terrible, awful thing happen to someone and it's on a big movie screen. It's just coming at you in bright colors and there's music and there's sounds and it's just so much to take in and it feels so real. It feels like you're really there and it ignites a lot of emotions versus reading about it in like a dry like little column somewhere in the newspaper. You're getting the same information from both sources, but one of them has much more emotional impact on you than the other one. So the idea with trauma is to get to the point where your nervous system isn't reacting to it that way anymore. We can't change the facts of what happened, but we can change the way that your nervous system reacts to the memory and therefore how your nervous system responds to sources of potential danger now, if that makes sense. Okay. So again, guys, I'm focusing here today on questions that are related to how to get help for chronic dizziness symptoms. So I see a lot of other questions coming up in the chat. If you're just joining us, welcome. I'm going to do my best to answer as many as I can. But again, I'm trying very specifically to answer questions on this topic since this is it is the most important topic I get asked about on my channel. Okay. So let's see. Let me pull up. Okay, so Cynthia, I think we've made it to your question. Okay, so how does VRT work, and does it generalize to my daily activities? Okay, so I think there were some other questions about VRT here. And yes, Corazon, I see your question. I will get there. I promise I'll talk about that. Let's see. Yeah, so I see. Does VRT help with nystagmus? That's from Isa. And should I keep doing VRT if I don't see any progress? That's from Natalie. Okay. So, and hello, Sam. Hello. Okay. So, how does VRT work? Does it generalize to daily activities? Can it help with nystagmus? Should I keep doing it even when it's not provoking dizziness? Great questions. So, VRT works by basically putting you in situations where your brain is forced to rely on one of those three senses or two of those three senses that are involved in the balance system. So, your eyes, your ears, and your sense of touch are all involved in your balance system. What happens very frequently is that your brain, after some kind of vestibular event or not, some kind of emotional event can do this too, just so I'm clear, your brain will just kind of start to ignore one or more of those senses and preferentially focus on one. And it's typically the eyes, but it's not always. Many of you have asked here in the chat about visual snow. This is exactly the same mechanism. Light sensitivity, visual vertigo, all of these things are related to the fact that your brain is hyper focused on your eyes and it's not focusing on information coming from your inner ears or your sense of touch. So that particular problem is something that VRT excels in treating. So the purpose of VRT is there are three main purposes of VRT. It's to help your brain adapt to the new status quo. So, in other words, if you lost function in one ear, it's to help your brain realize, oh, okay, you're getting a little less information from that ear now. Rebalance it out. And I have more about this in my video on unilateral hypofunction. So you can check that out. That's one of my least popular videos, I think, because it's just got jargon and the title, but it's about unilateral ear weakness. So one ear weakness, if you've been told, oh, you have weakness in one ear, that's what that one's about. So you can check that video out. But I talk about this there. Adaptation is when your brain gets with the program and understands your sensory systems have changed. Habituation is when your brain stops being so sensitive to the signals that are coming in from your senses. So this would be a case of your brain is really overemphasizing your eyes, for example, which is what I was just talking about. And VRT helps your brain learn not to focus on your eyes. And we do that by creatively torturing you in ways that force you to rely on some of your other senses and also force your eyes into kind of uncomfortable situations. So your brain learns to filter that information out more effectively. And then finally, the substitution, the final goal of VRT. Substitution means that VRT is trying to teach you to compensate for the loss of one sense if it's been lost by using your other senses. So, example here, we would cover your eyes and force you to walk around without vision. Okay, that's a super, super lame example, but the idea here is it's going to force you to rely on your ears and your sense of touch rather than your eyes. So, those are the three main goals, Cynthia. Those are the goals of VRT. It all works by relying on your brain's natural neuroplasticity. Again, as I said previously, neuroplasticity is something your brain does all the time. And a little note here, by the way, VRT is relatively inexpensive. It can be administered by a whole bunch of different professionals. So, physical therapists typically, but audiologists sometimes also. So, there really should be someone in your general area who can help you with this, no matter where you are in the world. And does it generalize to daily activities? So, Cynthia, that relates back to those three things that I mentioned are the goals of VRT. If you teach your brain to adapt to the change in between your the changes that have happened in your sensory system, if they've happened, if you teach your brain to stop over relying on the eyes, and if you teach the brain to use your other senses more, that does generalize to daily activities. However, okay, now there's my speech on VRT done. For those of you with chronic dizziness, which I assume is most of you here, not everyone, but most of you, the VRT doesn't always generalize to daily activities because what's driving the dizziness isn't a sensory problem, it's a brain reaction problem. It's a danger mode problem. It's not a, oh, my senses aren't working right, my brain doesn't know what's going on. That's not the issue. The issue is that your brain is stuck in this situation where it's perceiving threat and danger and it's not functioning correctly. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with your brain. It means your brain is like, yeah, that's fine, but there's a tiger chasing me. So I don't really care about how accurate that particular thing looks or feels. I care about you getting away from that tiger. Okay. So it can generalize to daily activities, and that's why it does work for so many people with triple PD, and it's really the gold standard for anyone with a vestibular problem, but that's the reason it doesn't work for so many of you. So that's why I tell people, especially if you already know you've got chronic dizziness, you've already been diagnosed with triple PD or MdDS, this VRT is, it can be helpful as exposure work, but it's not really exposing you to the things that your brain actually thinks are dangerous, like doing things in real life. So go do things in real life. That's how you rehabilitate yourself. So that's my thought on VRT. And how often should you do VRT? That's another question here. So how often should you do VRT? If you have an ear level problem, that like you have a unilateral weakness, you had some kind of surgery on your ear, then it's a 2 or 3 times a day type of thing. For those of you with triple PD, I've said this before on my channel, almost all of you are type A go-getter perfectionists. Not all of you. Some of you are super laid back, and I hats off to you, but most of you are really anxious about this. And I know that it sucks. It sucks. Of course, you're anxious, you want your dizziness to go away, but less is more in the case of chronic dizziness symptoms. If you're going to do VRT, I'd advise doing them once a day, and that's it. And being a B- student, spending 10, maybe 15 minutes on it, and then moving on. So, and then the way you frame it is important too. So this is where the CBT does come in, right? I am doing this to remind my brain that it's safe for me to do these things. I'm not doing this to fix my broken brain or like I'm rehabilitating myself because there's something awfully wrong with me. I'm doing this to send my body and my brain messages of safety about these particular activities. So that's the way I would do it. Yes, you're so welcome, Cynthia. I'm so glad that you asked it. That's a really great question. Okay. So Caroline is asking here. Caroline, I know who you are. Uh, you will be you will be on my channel in the form of information soon, Caroline, but I'll definitely answer your question. So do you have any experience with neuro-optimal brain training? So not that one specifically, but I know a whole lot about neuroplasticity programs. So we're just going to dive into that. So, okay. So ultimately, neuroplasticity is our goal. We want your brain to rewire, right? We all can agree I think if you've watched anything on my channel at all, you understand that the problem is your brain is not coordinating your senses appropriately, which means we want your brain to change enough so that it does start to coordinate those senses appropriately, right? So we're all on the same page about that. The issue that I have with neuroplasticity programs is often they're focused on trying to fix the circuit rather than understanding where the circuit is coming from. This is my bias and my perspective. So there's nothing wrong with a neuroplasticity program if you want to do one. I will say, though, of course, that please don't spend a lot of money on it. Please don't. My course is completely free. And from what I've heard from folks who've done neuroplasticity programs, a lot of the content is similar. I may not go into as much structure. So if you need the structure, then a neuroplasticity program makes sense. But ultimately, to me, it seems like what we should be working on is getting to the root of the problem, not the symptom. The brain coordination issue is not the root of the problem, in my opinion. It's what is causing your brain not to adapt. And that's my main question again, which again, I spent probably like 300 minutes on earlier in this Q&A talking about how I think these emotional and stress related factors are the big drivers of this whole thing. And so those are the things that I would focus on. Again, if you want to do a neuroplasticity program, again, it's not that it's not addressing the symptoms. It is going to address the symptoms, and many people do get better from that, but it doesn't always address the cause. And this is actually what I want to say about a type of therapy called ACT. So it's ACT, ACT. An amazing type of therapy, mindfulness based. And there actually was a pilot study done showing some positive results with triple PD, people with triple PD, on the order, unfortunately, of about what we see in the studies on CBT. So about 50% plus minus, right? Had remission. Again, a word, as you've just heard in this Q&A, I really just don't like. I don't like that the researchers are even looking at it this way. But that approach is basically a neuroplasticity approach. It teaches you to show apathy or nonchalance about the symptoms, to allow them, to accept them, to just let them be, to just accept the pain as part of the human condition. And it's a beautiful type of therapy. But in my opinion, it doesn't quite go far enough in the sense that yes, it is going to provoke neuroplasticity to some extent for you to accept the symptoms and not fear them. But as we talked about earlier in this Q&A, there are two groups of you guys. There's a group of you for whom, yeah, it's the fear and the anxiety that's really driving this. Wow, ACT or ACT or some of these other techniques are really going to do it for you. Neuroplasticity programs really going to do it for you. But for those of you, and I think that's a majority of you, whose symptoms have roots in all the things that have happened to you previously and have roots in a nervous system that is set up to be in danger mode, we want to address that. That's the issue. And neuroplasticity, ACT, and CBT don't really go that way. And again, this is my bias. If CBT and ACT have worked for you, neuroplasticity programs have worked for you, I'm thrilled. And I'm so happy to have you here. Whatever helps people is like 100%. I'm 100% for, honestly. I'm very influenced by the work that's been done with chronic pain and some of these other very, very severe chronic conditions. And I think we have a lot to learn from that literature and a lot to learn from that research. So that's what I have to say about neuroplasticity programs now that I've gone off on that tangent. Okay. Yes. Okay. Excellent. All right. So I'm going to answer this question because I think this is such a great one. So Isa, is there a way to address the cause that isn't going to a therapist? Journaling, maybe. Okay. So let's dive into this because the point of this Q&A was how to get help. We've talked a lot about the things that can help. We've talked a lot about questions to ask of your doctor. We've talked about why the treatment modalities that are generally used may or may not have helped you. We talked about VRT. Now let's talk about options. We talked about neuroplasticity programs too. So we've really covered a lot. Yes. So the first line is journaling. And Isa, and I'm so sorry. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. It could be Isa. I'm probably making it more complicated than it is, but please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Journaling is a great way of doing this. That's why in my, again, that free program that I'm sure a lot of you have taken, if you haven't just take it. It's free. Okay. Um, I talk a lot about journaling, and I have some little prompts in there. I have more prompts in my membership community. That's an ongoing project of mine. I want to have 30 days of prompts still. Again, that's kind of on my to-do list, way down the to-do list. But journaling is a great place to start. And a lot of people have reported to me tremendous relief from journaling. If you need some structure, I highly recommend Unlearn Your Pain by Dr. Howard Schubiner. He has this very extensive, and it's scientifically validated. So there have been studies using his methods of emotional expression, using his journaling prompts, that have shown tremendous benefit for people with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. Please consider his book. It's called Unlearn Your Pain, and you can use the journaling prompts there. It's like $20, so it's way cheaper than a therapist. Okay, so just a second here. So Natalie's asking about my video here. I'm going to put this one up here. Yeah, I know. I'm telling you that for some reason, I don't know if that's one of the ones YouTube's like, I don't know if I want people to see this, but I'm putting this in the chat. Okay, so Natalie, this is the video on unilateral hypofunction, but that means ear weakness, okay? Like single side ear weakness. So you can copy and paste that hopefully from the chat. All right. So what else can you do besides going to a therapist? Okay. So the other thing, as you guys know, is I have a membership community along with the free course. We have a whole section in my membership community called graduation, which is beautiful notes left there by people who have been on the membership community and have left because they've recovered. Okay. It's probably my favorite part of the community. And another awesome part of the community is also it's way cheaper than a therapist. Right now, it's $13 a month. And my plan is to keep it as inexpensive as possible. I want people to be able to access it without having to worry about the cost. Again, I see people from all around the world. I wanted it to be low enough cost that people could just go in there. But the membership community is so supportive and so awesome. Being seen by people and being able to share honestly how you're feeling, but also get the encouragement, like we're here with you and we all can do this. And then seeing actual people get better is like incredibly helpful. And again, totally an option for you if being going to a therapist isn't an option. The other thing is Corazon was just asking about this, and I brought this up. Let me put this up on the screen. Corazon asked it. Yes. So she asked about the VIP group coaching. So, okay. So the reason I started this, or I'm starting this, is because I know again, some of you have been on my YouTube channel for a while, some of you not, but you've probably seen somewhere on my channel or in my mailing list that I've been inundated because unfortunately triple PD and MdDS and other chronic dizziness issues are becoming quite popular in a bad way. And I don't have the capacity to help as many people as I would like. I just can't. I've ended up with this insane waiting list. So I have been trying to figure out how to help people. And again, the membership community is awesome, but the group coaching is a step up from that. We're going to have weekly meetings on video. So I'm using Zoom right now. That may change because some of you don't speak English fluently. So I've been trying to find solutions that will allow subtitles, and I've actually been testing some of that, but right now it's on Zoom. So weekly meetings on Zoom. The meetings will be with a group of people and me and on live video, and I will be coaching you and answering your questions in a way that doesn't involve me just talking at you, but rather us having a conversation, which is actually super important. I know that sometimes just getting the information is important, but sometimes you guys have questions and want to ask follow-up questions. And I want to be able to ask you questions to get more clarity on what you need. And so, yes, that's why I'm going to have that. I'm actually going to open up the registration today. So I'll put the link in the video description as well. The cost now is going to be $89 a month. And again, that includes the weekly meetings on Zoom with me, always led by me. And it will also include the larger membership community, which again, I just can't say enough amazing stuff about. And I also have in the membership community a bunch of extra stuff. So it's not super hype, like So I was about to say high production value. It's not like edited like YouTube 10-minute stuff. It's long stuff, like seminar stuff. I recorded long, like hour, 2 hour long seminars, and I have a series of 6 of them, and I have booklets and workbooks and information sheets and stuff on there too. So that's also something that comes with the group coaching. And the other nice thing about coaching is that it's month to month. So you can sign up for a month. You can cancel or change your subscription anytime you want to, as long as you do it before you're charged for the next month. So it's just, again, it's supposed to be a place where you come when you need it and then you leave when you're better. And that's my favorite thing, when people leave. And I don't mean that I don't want you to be there. I want you to go live your life. So that's the goal. You're not signing up for any specific period of time other than just the month. Okay. So the first meeting will be on Tuesday. And a word about the meetings, they're going to be at noon Eastern time. I know that doesn't work for all of you. I know some of you are in Singapore and Australia and New Zealand and India, and that time may be out of range for you. My ultimate goal is to actually have 2 times so that you could attend either one that works for you. And with time, as my group grows, I'm going to have that so I can try to accommodate people in different time zones. But for right now, I'm hitting most of you with the noon time. If you want to join anyway, though, all the sessions will be recorded. You can come and back and watch them anytime. And I'll be in this group. It's a private group within my community. I'll be able to personally answer your questions and monitor what's going on and coach you. So there will be benefits even if you can't attend all the live meetings. Okay. All right. Cool. So I hope that answered the question. If anyone has more questions about that, I'm going to definitely answer that as much as I can. And just to remind you guys, if you're new to my Q&A today, hello and welcome. I'm focusing today on how to get help for chronic dizziness symptoms. So I'm not going to be able to answer a lot of the other questions here today as much as I want to, but I will get to as many of them as I can. So I'm going to focus here on a question that I think is going to answer questions of some of you in the chat as well. So, and Abhimanyu, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Again, I'm sensitive to that as someone named Yonit. I try to pronounce people's names. He says, and I'm paraphrasing what he said. He wrote kind of a heartbreaking post. He said, I've been suffering for years, keep telling myself I'm safe, but nothing has helped and I'm not getting better. What do I do? Okay. So some of you here in the chat have said, I have symptoms 24/7. I'm struggling. I've tried everything. Nothing's working. Okay. So this is when you need help. And I wish that I could just like make a video series or a course and be like, just do this and it'll fix you and that'll be it. We are social creatures. We humans are social creatures. This is when having other people in the picture to help you is really important. So if you are in this position, you've been suffering for years, you keep telling yourself you're safe, you've internalized all the messages in my YouTube videos, you've tried the course and you're not getting better, then you have some options. So let's talk about the options now. So the options for you are, one option is to try to find a local provider in your area who deals with, again, psychophysiological disorders, but chronic pain, chronic dizziness, etc. This is difficult because some of these providers, again, are going to take a CBT or an ACT approach, and they're not going to think that they're going to be able to resolve your symptoms. They're just going to be trying to help you cope better with them. And while that's a very good thing, I would love for you to cope better with your symptoms and not be miserable. I feel like that stops short of the actual goal, which is for you not to have the symptoms. I don't like when therapy is specifically focused on you coping and not actually getting better. I just don't feel like that really is adequate. So I think that there are certain types of experiential therapies that are much more effective, especially if you really believe what I'm saying. Okay. So if you don't believe what I'm saying and you don't buy it, and you're just like, I just did your course because I don't know what else to do. And I don't know if you're right. This stuff's not going to work. It's not going to work because the fear process, that fear cycle is still going to keep going in your brain. But if there's enough, I'm just asking you to suspend disbelief. If you could believe in it enough, maybe it is my nervous system. Maybe my brain is actually causing all this nonsense. if you can get to that point, then an emotionally focused therapy is going to be much more helpful to you than some of these other therapies that focus on coping. And emotionally focused therapies, I'm not a psychologist, but again, through working with a bunch of clients, I've come across a few that I like better than others. I'm going to put these in the chat as I say them so that you guys know what I'm talking about. So let's see here. So I have, and by the way, Maggie, I'm going to get to your question. I can totally answer your question. The answer is yes, I do have smaller groups. Yes, actually, and let me pull up by Sam here before I get to the experiential therapies. Sam, hello, Sam. Sam says, I think books on TMS are massively useful in this situation so as to actually cause the belief change. Yes, yes. So before I do anything else in the chat, I'm going to put up, okay, so books by John Sarno. These are all in my course in the chronic dizziness resource sheet, which is also free on my members.thesteadycoach.com, which you can access again through the link here in the description of the Q&A, which I will put in once the Q&A is done. Or you could just go to my website, thesteadycoach.com, and scroll down to where it says free course. And if you go there, that has the resource sheet as well. But John Sarno, Alan Gordon, Howard Schubiner, and David Schechter. Okay, so these guys, I'm gonna put this up on the screen for you. These are the books. These are the main authors of books on TMS that are helpful to read to help you understand the role of the brain in this whole awful thing that you're going through. Yes. Okay, so John Sarno, Alan Gordon, Howard Schubiner, David Schechter. I'll leave that up on the screen. So any books by these folks is going to help with that belief change. If you already believe it and you're already like, oh my gosh, Yoni's totally right. This is totally a nervous system issue. You don't need to read more, but sometimes it's helpful to get the reinforcement when you have the doubts because the doubts really suck and they happen to everyone. Okay. So as far as therapies go, I have personal preferences here and here they are. So there is one called it's EAET or PRT. Okay, so I'll put those up on the screen. So EAET is emotional awareness and expression therapy, and PRT is pain reprocessing therapy. There is some actually beautiful literature out there on these two. Their effectiveness is excellent for pain. That's what they've been studied for, but as a person who works with chronic dizziness, I see them very, very, very effective for triple PD and MdDS as well. And to answer your question, Trish, you mentioned PPPD frequently. Do these various methods help with MdDS? Yes. Most of my clients have been diagnosed with MdDS or triple PD or a combination of both or vestibular migraine. So as far as I'm concerned, the methods are the same. The exception for MdDS is that the VRT exercises are not usually as important. I focus exclusively on the emotional components and the fear components. So yes, and from my experience, they are very effective for those symptoms as well. So, okay, so I mentioned EAET and PRT. So those ones are specifically for psychophysiological disorders like chronic pain, chronic dizziness. Then there's ISTDP. So this one has also been shown quite a bit in the research to help with chronic conditions like these. ISTDP, intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy. It's not like regular dynamic psychotherapy. It's an emotionally focused therapy that focuses on getting you to express emotions. And yes, it is definitely not just talk therapy. It's very different. Yes. So, okay, so those three so far. So then let's just say you live in a country where I think Milena said, Milena is from Serbia. Hello. And I see again, my friend Nick Hontam, I'm sorry, I don't know what your full name is, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, says that in Europe it's not very well recognized. So you may find that this is just not what are these types of therapies? These weird Americans and their weird acronyms, or these weird Brits and their weird acronyms. So those types of therapies are not available everywhere. So we're going to now move on to somatic experiencing, sensory motor, psychotherapy, and compassionate inquiry, which is kind of an interesting one. Maybe I'll leave that one off for now. IFS. Okay, so these three. Okay. So these types of therapies were designed for people specifically who were dealing with trauma. but they're body focused therapies, which mean, again, guys, you have physical symptoms. So if you believe what I say, and I say that your nervous system is responsible for these physical symptoms, but you have real physical symptoms in your body, wouldn't it also make sense to use your body to help you get better rather than talking about it? Right. In fact, I would say some of you, one of the things, a defining characteristic of some of you guys who I see as clients or in my membership community is you are so analytical sometimes. Okay. If you're not, that's cool. But so analytical. You live in the thinking part of your brain. You're overthinking and analyzing everything. And I've got to get you out of your heads to help you work through emotions and stress. You can't talk about emotions or about stress and have that get better. You actually have to experience those things and again, reprocess them. So these types of psychotherapeutic techniques are SE, so somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, and my personal favorite, internal family systems. So all of these types of therapy are emotionally focused. They're emotionally based. They're somatic. They're based on your body. Working with a therapist with one of the who's experienced in one of these modalities is also going to help you with your chronic dizziness symptoms. So that's an option. And I want to say also there are in my free the free resource sheet, which is also again on the same website as the course, there's a reference list of therapists who work with people worldwide who specialize in chronic pain. And I know some of these personally. In fact, I'm so excited to say that Daniel Lyman, who is the founder of the Mind Body Therapy Center, those of you who've read Alan Gordon's book, Daniel Lyman works very, very closely with Alan Gordon. He's going to be on my channel. I'm actually interviewing him today, so I hope to have that video out for you guys soon about what therapy for mind-body conditions looks like. And his group and these other groups in the resource sheet specialize in this stuff, and they work with people worldwide by video. They have waiting lists, as do I, but they are worth checking out, and they may be able to get you in more quickly than I can because, again, just of the volume of folks that I'm working with right now. So I think that should answer your question, Abhimanyu. If therapies are not an option for you, or just out of the financial option, or there aren't these types of therapists in your area or whatever, then please consider the membership community or the coaching. And I know I had mentioned before that the VIP coaching is going to be a group of people with me. The membership community is all like it's a community forum essentially, but it's nice. And there's a chat feature. You can chat with other community members. I do live Q&As every week like this one, but I know everyone in the community, so I can really answer their questions a little more fully. So those are all options for you, again, from higher to lower cost. And again, as even the lowest cost would be to get one of those books that I mentioned, like Dr. Howard Schubiner's Unlearn Your Pain, which is like $20 and has a bunch of journaling prompts in it. So again, you have options. You are not alone. I would love to see you get help, but pick the type of help that was going to work best for you. So speaking of help, Maggie asked this question. I just want to answer because I just spoke about the VIP coaching. Is there an option for smaller group? Yes, I have small groups. I actually have two small groups, one on Wednesdays and one on Thursdays. The Wednesday group is full. The Thursday group has a couple openings. If you go to my website, thesteadycoach.com, you will see there's a button that says get help. And there's a little drop down that says private group sessions or small private groups. I don't remember what I wrote on the website. Oh my gosh. This is why I'm on YouTube and making videos rather than doing website design. But anyway, if you click on that, it'll take you to an application. There's an application process because the groups are closed and they're quite intimate. We work through a lot of emotional stuff together. It's not for everyone. So I always like to have a conversation with someone before he or she joins and make sure that we all want the same thing and that person would be a good fit. So yes, you can totally apply to that. No cost to apply or anything, but those groups are closed and have very limited capacity. So I could only let up to 6 people in. Okay. So let me see if I had other questions. Yes. So one more question that was asked before the Q&A, and then I'll hop onto the chat and see if there are any other questions I can pick out from here to help you guys with. For those of you asking about visual snow, I saw that pop up. I have a video coming out on visual snow that will either be out this week or next week. So stay tuned. I have a whole video on it. So Daniela asks, What if the vertigo is the trauma? I have a fear of real rotational vertigo that I can't resolve. And again, I'm paraphrasing. Daniela had a little bit more detail in her question. Okay. So when someone comes to me with a question like this, first I want to say it's completely understandable that you have this fear of vertigo. Vertigo sucks. And it has a way of just completely it just harnesses your fight or flight system and enslaves you to it in a way that is not fully in your control. So it's awful that you have to deal with it. And of course you have a fear of it. That said, my again, this is why Q&As like this can be tricky, right? Because I'd want to have a conversation with you, Daniela, about this to gauge a little bit more about where this is coming from. Because I find, again, people's reactions to things are affected by their past experiences. I know this may seem crazy to you, Daniela, going through vertigo, but I've had people who come in with spinning vertigo who are just like, wow, that really sucks. But they don't avoid it. They don't avoid movements. They don't brace for it. They're just like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I guess I had that. They don't develop that fear of it for whatever reason. And to me, it seems like there's something worth looking at when it comes to that fear. And it can be that the initial trauma of going through this medical condition is its own thing that needs to be worked through in a therapeutic relationship. I have definitely seen that. I've seen a few people who had a maybe even not a dizziness related trauma, but a single related medical trauma that just had to be worked through and resolved in the way that I discussed previously in the Q&A about, remember I talked about reworking those memories so your brain just doesn't put as much emotional weight into them anymore. They have to be worked it has to be worked through in that way for your fear to change, because you're right. What's happening right now, Daniela, it's you can't rationalize I mean, you, you can't rationalize with this fear. It's not a rational fear. It's a deep body fear that makes complete sense. It's your nervous system saying, "Oh hell no, I can't go through that again." But given what I know that not everyone reacts to vertigo that way, although again, if you do, you are in good company here and I am with you. And so is everyone else here on my channel. But there's often a reason why the brain is having that extremely sensitive response to it, and that can usually be worked with. So again, my approach to this when I'm working with someone one-on-one would be to first of all make sure there really isn't something else in your past that's causing you to be overly sensitive. I don't mean that in a pathological way, but to have a sensitive nervous system that's going to respond to physical sensations in a very, very strong way. So I would be working through some of that stuff with you too, but I would be looking back at when the vertigo started, what was going on in your life, and working through that experience to see if we can calm your brain's emotional connections, the automatic emotional responses your brain is having in response to that memory that's causing you to fear the vertigo now. Okay, so I hope that made sense to you guys. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so Kit is asking a good question here that I'm just seeing here that I think is related to what I just answered. So I'm gonna go ahead and answer this one. So, can you explain how somatic tracking helps with symptoms? So, it's it's basically what I would just explain to Daniela is a little more deep than what somatic tracking does, but essentially it's short circuiting. So remember, I said two groups, or there are two components of this chronic dizziness thing. There's the fear cycle, and then there's the past stuff that's feeding into it, right? So with the fear cycle, what somatic tracking does is it actually gives you a chance to open up those circuits in your brain that are connecting between the dizziness and the fear. Again, it's totally normal to be fearful of dizziness. I like, just so I'm clear. But when the fear and the dizziness are so closely locked into each other, you can't really have one without having the other. They're just going to kind of the fear is going to happen and it's going to bring dizziness with it, or the dizziness is going to happen, it's going to bring fear with it. So we want to loosen that connection a little bit. And somatic tracking helps you do that. It helps you start to be with the symptoms in a non-fearful way. It's actually based on some of the principles in acceptance and commitment therapy that I totally talked some smack about earlier. Again, I just want to be clear. I love those types of therapies. It's not that I'm saying they're bad, but this particular principle of mindfully being with symptoms, not trying to change them, we're taking it a step further than acceptance. We're saying when we can disconnect the dizziness from the fear, even temporarily, even just for a little bit, your brain is going to naturally readapt. Your brain is going to naturally start to integrate your senses more appropriately, because again, my question is always, why is your brain not adapting? Your brain naturally adapts to all things, to everything normally. So why is it not adapting? It's often that fear cycle that's just keeping that circuit stuck. So once we take that fear cycle away, your brain can naturally start to work on this sensory problem. And through natural exposures, through things in your daily life. I saw a question here earlier that asked, is it really enough? I think David asked this question, is it really enough to do just daily life activities? And it absolutely is, because through daily life activities, your brain's going to adapt to what it needs to do to give you appropriate sensory information. Okay. So, yeah, so a question here about parasympathetic breathing that's also about similar to this somatic tracking question. So Natalie, same thing here. We're just trying to send your brain a different message. And instead of with somatic tracking, we're kind of using our mind to do this, to send a message of safety rather than fear. With parasympathetic breathing, we're sending our brain a message of safety from our bodies. We're sending our brain a message, nothing to fear, no danger, cancel the danger signal. It's not necessarily going to change your symptoms, because the fear circuit and the dizziness circuit are two different things. You can take the fear away and the dizziness may still be there for a while. Your brain needs time to rewire that, but stick with it. The more time you spend uncoupling the fear from the dizziness symptoms, the more easily your brain is going to be able to adapt and change the dizziness symptoms. All right, so I'm going to take a look back through the chat, see if I can answer some more of the questions. We've just got a couple more questions, time for a couple more questions here. So thank you guys for so patiently waiting. And I hope that the answers I gave to the questions about how to get help for chronic dizziness, I hope those are really helpful, because again, that's probably the most important question I get on my channel. Okay, so Jordan's asking about depersonalization and derealization. So my course definitely helps with that, because it's it's a similar mind-body symptom. In fact, it's one of the more easily identifiable mind-body symptoms, because there's very rarely any kind of physical explanation. I think sometimes people with chronic pain get a raw deal because they might actually have a herniated disc. It's not necessarily causing their pain, but it's there. Whereas with depersonalization, derealization, those are widely recognized typically as coming from high levels of panic, anxiety, stress, fight or flight mode, what have you. So, yes, the course helps with that. But when we're focused on a specific symptom as our main source of fear, it can really it really likes to stick around. So again, I talked before about that fear dizziness cycle, or the fear depersonalization cycle. The more we're focused on a specific symptom, like, oh my gosh, I got to get rid of this, everything else I can tolerate, but not this, we're increasing that fear signal in the brain. So that's one reason I tell people in practice, when you have symptoms come up that you hate, it's actually not the most effective method to drop into to trying to do parasympathetic breathing to try to turn it off, because it's not going to help, because you're sending your brain the message, oh God, I need this to stop. Oh my gosh, I'm so afraid of this, which is not what you want to do. Okay. Not to say parasympathetic breathing won't help. It's really awesome. It can help, but you also want to try to turn your brains toward what is actually, excuse me, causing all of these symptoms in the first place. So the advice I often will give to people is, when that symptom comes up, you can do parasympathetic breathing. You're going to do the I'm safe, like Abinyam. Oh my gosh, how did I pronounce your name? Abimanyu. Okay. Who, as he asked, um, when you're going to do all those things, but then you're going to say, what's bothering me? What's actually leading to all of this? You're going to remind yourself of the mechanism of all this. You're going to see if there's something emotionally that's stressing you out. And you're going to, again, just turn your attention onto those things. It's not about fixing it. I got a lot of questions on my channel like, I'm in this horrible situation. Am I still going to be able to get better? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. You are not fragile. Just because I talk about the relationship with stress doesn't mean that you're supposed to be living a completely stress-free life. It's just not possible. You will not be able to do that, I promise. it's about how you react to stress. It's about how you respond to it, and just being aware of those emotions and that stress, and realizing that's what's behind all this. It's just my nervous system reacting to the stress, and I'm going to do what I can, set the boundaries I can. That makes a huge difference. I know it doesn't sound like a lot of doing, but it really, really does help. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, so Terry has a question here about how to manage daily activities. Terry, I have two videos on this. Let me put that in the chat. I'll put the first one in the chat because it links to the second one, or it should. Sometimes I forget to do such things. There's part one. So here you go. This is, oh, nope, that's not the right video. Just a second, guys. If someone else has an automatic catalog of my videos, then you could totally post this instead of me. Here's part one. Okay. Okay. So Terry, for you for daily life. Okay. So I have two videos on that, just kind of how do you cope with constant symptoms, or kind of those daily activities of living. I know it stinks, and it's just I would not wish what you guys are going through on my worst enemy. The courage I see in my channel. I know you guys may not see this in the comments, but like I have these moments when I'm answering the YouTube comments. I'm just like, the courage it takes to be able to face this day in day out is just, it's just mind blowing. And then you guys thank me, and it's so weird. I'm like, I'm not the one who's having to deal with all this stuff, and the amount of pain you have to go through, and suffering you have to go through, and the growth you have to do that you're forced into because of these types of conditions is just unreal. So I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, Terry, but I do want to reassure you that people really, really, really do get better. I'm not making it up. Again, you can see it in the YouTube comments. You can definitely see it in the membership community because people constantly post about their progress. But you really can get better. There's gonna be some suffering involved, and I wish it weren't the case, but you're not alone. And I know that that's not perfect. That's not a perfect answer, but you're not alone. There are others walking with you through the suffering, and I know you can do it and you can get better. Okay. So this is a great question. So again, Isa, what should you do if you can't pinpoint the source or cause for stress? So I see this happen a lot. Again, this is where other people can be really helpful. So sometimes, so if you're doing kind of the low tech method, journaling is helpful because sometimes you're going to start to see patterns. Some of us are so driven by our daily lives and doing that we're not even really aware of what's bothering us. In fact, I would say that's kind of one of the hallmarks of triple PD also, that I see folks who were like, again, not all of you had this, but people were like, "Oh my gosh, now that I look back, I'm like, how did I not end up, I mean, how could I not have ended up with triple PD? It was so ridiculous how much stress I was under," but we don't always recognize that at the time. So I think journaling is really helpful. Mindfulness just means being aware in the moment. So it doesn't mean that you have to practice meditation, but I highly recommend thinking about doing some kind of mindfulness practice where you check in with yourself, even just once a day. You spend 10 quiet minutes just checking in with yourself. What am I feeling? What am I experiencing? Because there is some source of stress in your life. And working through those things is going to be helpful for you in your recovery. But this were also where it can be helpful to talk to other people who are dealing with it, or get into some kind of group if possible, if that's financially possible for you, because often you'll be like, oh my gosh, I am totally one of these people. Like, a lot of times I get comments on my videos like, Yoni, you're describing me. It was really weird. Oh my gosh, I am exactly that person. I am that person. And when you see that, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize how much stress I was putting myself under. So again, that could be really helpful too. Okay. Yes. All right. So one last question here that's here at the bottom. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything pretty. Like, I know you guys had so many amazing questions, and I wish I could answer all of them. I really, really wish I could. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to pull up this one because this one relates directly to the topic we talked about today, and then we'll close. So here we have a question about, I have a doctor who insists the continual dizziness I'm experiencing is a migraine headache. He gave me a migraine book to read, but he won't discuss other possibilities. Okay. It's great news for you. Do you know what a migraine is? So I'm not asking you that in a mean, like weird way. I'm asking because a migraine is basically a something weird's happening in your brain and we don't know what it is. Issue. Okay. So happy news. It means you don't have tissue damage or disease. It means that you have a neural circuit problem. And that's fantastic. It means you can thank your doctor for ruling out medical issues that could be potentially causing dizziness. And now we're in that psychosocial arena. So at the beginning of this Q&A, I talked about how doctors are amazing at diagnosing biological problems. They are not so great at diagnosing or helping people with problems that are psychosocial or heavily psychosocial. So great news, you're in the right place. So everything on my channel applies to you, but I also wanted to tell you there's a podcast episode. So there's a podcast episode on migraines. Let me see if I can find it. I just posted it recently on my membership community. Let's see. Actually, several of them. Let me see. It's called Like Mind, Like Body. Here, I'm just going to post the main link here in the chat. So Curable is a free, it's not a free app. I'm sorry. It's a paid app. And I am, by the way, have zero business association with them at all. I do not have any business association with anything on my channel. I promise you guys, if I ever do, I will be very, very clear that I have a business interest in something. So I just know of Curable and like it and have recommended it to people. It's an app that's really helpful for some of you with chronic dizziness. So going back to those of you who are like, I need a low tech way to help myself, Curable is another amazing way to do that. And Curable, again, it's like $10 a month. It's not super expensive at all. It's not dizziness specific. It's focused on pain. So again, that's something that you have to work with, but Curable is great. And they have a podcast on migraines, and it was with a neurologist. So let's see. Yes, here it is. I found it's if you go to that webpage that I just posted, you will scroll down and it's like the second podcast episode, a neurologist perspective on chronic pain, but he talks very specifically about migraines and why it's a mind-body condition. So happy to tell you that migraines are one of those things that the mind-body community has been working in this way for a long time. I know that you can get better. So that's great news. Okay. Yes. Hello, Mindy. You're catching me right at the end, but I'm so happy you made it. It still counts. Yeah. So, yeah. So, okay. So I'm seeing, again, I really wish I could answer more of the questions today, but we're out of time. So if I do want to say though, because a lot of the questions that I saw asked today that I couldn't get around to answering were questions related to specific symptoms. So I want to tell you, I'm going to very, very quickly review the list of some of the symptoms, and they're listed in my free course as well. But you guys are probably already familiar with the list of dizziness symptoms, but here are some of the others that I've heard from people with PPPD, neural circuit dizziness. They are all the same. Okay, so here we go. Neck pain, neck tightness, neck cracking, shoulder pain, shoulder tightness, shoulder cracking, heaviness, jelly legs, tremors, shaking, numbness, weird regional pain. So like pain that is just in one part of your body, skin sensitivity, a really bizarre one called burning mouth syndrome. Don't even look it up, guys. It's just weird perceptions of burning in your mouth, itchiness, like a lot of the things that we associate with anxiety, like heart palpitations, chest pain, chest tightness, stomach problems, digestive issues, plantar fasciitis, unexplained musculoskeletal pain of any kind. And that's just a short list. These are all things that I've seen with PPPD or other neural circuit dizziness that I consider to be part of exactly the same condition that is related to an overactive nervous system. So those are 100%, as far as I'm concerned, neural circuit, and they will resolve as long as you realize that that's what they are. That's the real kicker for all this, guys. To sum it all up, and it's not about, oh, I believe, and therefore it's like magic particles will fix me or unicorns will come from the sky and like pour magic dust on me. See, I'm channeling my two daughters now. But it's about as long as you believe there's something broken about you, as long as you believe your back pain or your stomach problems or whatever that are medically unexplained, of course, if they're medically explained, then there's a medical reason for them. are coming from a broken body, then the fear signal keeps going and the cycle keeps going. But once you start to question that and say, well, what if this is related to stress? What if this is related to suppressed emotions or conflicts or difficulties I had in my life? Then you're opening up that circuit. You're taking the fear, you're starting to distance, get some space from the fear, and you have a chance at actually resolving the symptoms permanently. Yes. So I'm going to give you one more video here that Corazon just asked for because this is such a good one. Also, one of my ones that's not as much viewed because I think most people on my channel actually do suffer from dizziness. But Corazon, here you go. The question was, is there a video I can share with my wife to help her understand what is happening to me? The video is here. I just posted it in the chat. I posted it on the screen, but that's not helpful. You can search for how to help someone with chronic dizziness. It's on my channel. It is free. It's 20 minutes long. It's intended for loved ones and friends. I will hopefully have content soon for medical professionals as well. That's just trickier because I have to be able to produce content that isn't going to put people off immediately and say, "Oh, well, she doesn't know what she's talking about. What is, this is biological." And, or, what do you mean this is fear and anxiety related or whatever? So I have to figure out how to explain this in a way that your neurologists, your ENTs are going to be receptive to it, but I'm working on that. Oh, yes, thank you. Brain zaps too. Thank you, Ivana. Thank you, Ivana. That's another big one. All right, guys. So I'm going to have to close for today, but this was so much fun. So thank you so much for coming. And if you enjoyed the Q&A and you like Q&As, please consider joining my membership community because I do them every week. We usually do them on Wednesday afternoons. So if you made this one, you'd probably be able to make the weekly ones. And my community is much smaller, obviously, than YouTube. So I know most of the folks in there and I can answer their questions more specifically. So I'd love to see you there if that's an option for you. And again, to remind you guys, the VIP coaching registration will be open now. You can do that by clicking the link here in the YouTube description. And when I get off this Q&A, my website is also going to change. It may take a few minutes to update, but you can go to my website, click get help now. And then when you go to the VIP coaching, there's going to be a button, sign up now. You can sign up and you will get immediate access to the membership community and you'll be able to attend our first meeting, which is on Tuesday. And I will be able to meet you in person and answer your questions and help you. And it's going to be a wonderful time. So, a wonderful time, bring tissues. There are usually tears, but we will be there together and you will not be alone anymore. Okay. So thank you for being here with me. Again, I will be continuing to put these resources out on YouTube as long as you want them. So just stick with me here on my channel. And as always, you guys are like the best group of followers ever. You're just like the sweetest, kindest, most helpful people. I see you commenting to each other with words of encouragement. It's just like, it's just amazing. It's amazing. You guys are awesome. So thank you so much for being here with me and for the constant words of, I know that it's not exactly words of encouragement, but knowing that I'm helping you guys is what keeps me doing this. So please make sure I know that. But when the video helps you, tell me so that I know I should keep making them. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. And I hope I see you in the membership community, maybe, or in the VIP coaching, maybe, or at least here on YouTube for sure. Right. All right, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you for coming.